So last year was my first year making these videos. For this year, I'm going to carry on a little bit in the same way, refine it, of course, till things are a little bit better. If anybody wants to make comments on any of the videos I've done, this would be the one to do it, because this is partly how it's going to shape the next year. One thing I'm going to do, I think, that I said as I got going here that I wasn't going to get involved with, but more and more I'm seeing these SHTF videos and the inch videos, I'm never coming home, and the Teletubbies, the end of the world as we know it. And nobody really knows, how things are going to go. Certainly we're seeing some pretty strange things in the world right now that can tend to make us a little nervous. And that's happened in the past. Here comes an Argo to make a noise when I'm doing this. Jeez. So, but the more I see of these videos coming out, I'm not going to say anybody's wrong. It's not for me to judge anybody else. I'm only responsible for what I say and what I do. But there's a lot of stuff I see coming out there that, I don't know that I necessarily agree with or would do it that way. And as you may have noticed over the last few months, I tend to have a different way of looking at things than a lot of people, different way of doing things, sort of a different attitude towards it. I never really had a specific plan other than to just share some of the experiences and things that I've done and do. And it wasn't going to be a cooking channel or specifically a hunting channel or specifically a fishing channel, just almost kind of more of a life on the homestead type thing. I do live in a pretty cool area, temperature-wise and otherwise. And all I want to do maybe with these videos for the year is to say things and do things and show you things that'll make you think. And unfortunately for a lot of people nowadays, with desk jobs and city jobs and computers and cell phones and tablets and you name it, all these things that I'm not that familiar with, honestly, so I don't really have much of an opinion on those, but they take away our need, if not even our ability maybe, to think for ourselves. Some piece of electronics is telling us what to do and when to do it, how to do it, where to do it. You can't hardly walk your dog without a regulation. And in fact, that's very true in a lot of places. But I guess that's it. So in the course of the next year, I'm not going to dwell on it, but you may see a video or two here and there that kind of touch on some of these, I don't want to say doomsday, because we don't really know what's going to happen. Nobody does. But it's certainly, to be prepared is something and that's not a new thing. Being prepared isn't something that people have been doing for thousands of years. Everybody who's ever been a farmer or had in the years in the past where people were farmers a lot, when you butcher a hog in the winter and put your garden things into the freezer for the winter and so on, that's preparing. That's preparing for having food over the winter time, and it's no different than preparing for anything else. When you buy car insurance, you're preparing. You prepare for everything in some form or another. So when you look at somebody who's a prepper, that's not a dirty word. It depends on how you look at it. Like I said, I'll probably touch on this from time to time, and I'll try not to get too carried away like I usually do. But anyhow, we'll talk to you in a bit. Come around here to the pile of logs that I haven't cut yet. These are for next year. Mostly it's tamarack, and as you can see, there's a bunch of birch in it. And there's, I've cut some of it up. There was about 18 or 19 face cords worth in that tier of wood. And I've cut some of it up already, but I may get back at it because we haven't really had our first major snowfall yet, so this might be a good time to carry on. This log here, this birch log I've set off to the side, is about 2 feet in diameter. That's it right there. Yeah, nice looking birch log. Alright, hang on. Somewhere under there. There it is. Here, let me clean this off just a little bit so you see what I'm talking about here. I set this log aside. It's just a hair over 16 feet long. It's about 20 inches in diameter. Birch has a fairly straight grain. And I set it over from the rest of the wood pile so that I wouldn't get kind of crazy. There's another one actually. So I wouldn't get too crazy and cut it all up before I realize what I want. I want to get about 8, maybe 9 feet somewhere out of that log, and it doesn't have to necessarily from either end. It could be somewhere in the middle where I can get, you know, the least amount of knots and so on. The reason I've separated it is I'm going to get my chainsaw mill, and I want this quarter sawn. Get down into the snow here. So when you normally take boards off, you just start at the top and you square it. You flip it upside down on your sawmill. This will be a chainsaw project. You square the other end off so you've got 2 parallel surfaces, and then you just start slicing off boards. And obviously the ones at the top are a little bit narrower. They get wider towards the middle and slightly narrower back to the other end. But that's not what I want to do, because when you do that, the grain will be across. And it's typical of all the wood you see in the lumberyard. That's just regular sawn grain. When you quarter saw it, you literally quarter the log, and then you take logs and cut each quarter left and right, or down and across and down and across. And the reason is you want to get a vertical grain, and there's only so much of it in each log. You can't get it all that way, no matter how you cut it. But that's why when you choose a good axe handle, you look at the end of the axe handle, the grain is vertical to the length of the handle. That's quarter sawn wood. That's what we're looking for. And out of this, I make skis and some axe handles, or some blanks for handles so that I'll have them when I need them, and paddles. I carve paddles as well. Because this log is as big as it is, this birch that I showed you, the bigger the diameter of the log, the more area that can be quarter sawn to get the vertical grain like you would get in an axe handle. So I'm going to come over here to the log pile, because there's a pretty decent board there, or log there, that's actually quite a nice one, just not as big. Still a good one to saw. I just won't get quite as much out of it. By quarter sawing, because the grain obviously goes around the rings of the tree, the growth rings go all the way around, at any given point, and it doesn't matter how the log is oriented, if you take a strip out of here, or if the log was turned, it doesn't matter. Like I said, the orientation doesn't matter. But if you take a strip right through the center and out to each side, the grain will come, and it's all going up. So that stretch right through there, the whole thing, the grain is pretty near vertical. And that's the piece that you want, because it's a lot stronger. And for the sake of making skis, for example, it's a lot easier because your skis are going to be very, very thin. You remember the skis at the tip are probably only 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch thick. But because it's got the vertical grain, when you run it through the steam box, it's going to get a lot easier to bend it, and it's going to hold the bend, and there's a whole lot less chance of ever splitting it or anything. So you get a much stronger ski that way. If you've got a big enough log, like the other one we were just looking at, the section that you can cut might be a great big wide piece like this. And of course, it'll be quite a bit wider. So what you want to do is come here and cut out a piece that's maybe 4 inches, a 2x4 basically. You can get one here, you can get one here, and you could get one here and here as well. And of course there'll be, barring cracks and knots, there'll be the full length of the log. So what you do is you can get at least 4 2x4s, 2x6s, depending on the size of the log, the full length. If you cut those 4 pieces, or 6 pieces, whatever it is, into say 40-inch lengths, you can get an awful whole lot of blanks that you can use for an axe handle, or anything else like that. The other thing you can do is you could cut, say, 1-inch boards through here and here. Now you don't want to go, the more you go down, then the grain starts to turn, so you're going to get the horizontal cut. So you can only go, so far here. When you start to get the grain on an angle, as you get outside the edge of, your usable quarter saw, When the grain becomes an angle, that's called rift cutting. And it's better than flat sod that you get at a lumber yard, but it's still not as good as the straight vertical quarter grain. That's why a real good axe handle has, you know, if you look at the end of the handle lengthwise, the grain is vertical to the length of the handle. But on this log, you could easily get, well, this is what, 10 inches? So I could get 10-inch, I could get two 10-inch boards, 10-inch wide, say an inch thick, maybe even 3. So again, over a 16-foot length, those 3 boards, and my skis are hunter skis, the ones that I make. Unlike most cross-country skis, I'm sinking here. Unlike most cross-country skis, which are, you know, 3 inches wide at the most, and very long, maybe some of them are as much as 6 and 7 feet long and more. My hunter skis are quite wide. They're about anywhere from 6 to 8 inches wide, depending on what boards I have and whatever I want to do. But they're quite short. They're probably only, the board that I start out with is only 4 to 5 feet long. So you end up with maybe, well, let's say 4 feet of board and then another several inches so you can get that nice tip bent up on it. And by quarter sawing it, you can get that tip bent up really good. And by quarter sawing it, as it tapers out to the tip, where it's only 3/8 of an inch wide, it's very strong. It's not going to delaminate or separate the grain. And I could probably get, even out of this log here, I could probably get 2 or maybe even 3 pairs of skis out of this. So it would be 6 boards, 3 pairs of skis. And out of that big log that we were looking at, that many more, because the log is simply bigger. So I might get a 3rd one across, and instead of 2 1-inch boards, I might get 3 or 4 or 5, whatever the case may be. So you can see where you could make a lot of skis out of one log. Okay, so another thing I do is I carve paddles. I love canoeing. Canoeing is one of my favorite passions to be out doing. So I carve paddles from these. I've carved a lot of paddles over the years. Some of them I've sold, most of them I've given away or whatever. I hear a snowmobile going off in the background there. I don't know if you can hear that or not. So again, you know, you get maybe a 5-inch wide board because you're going to have to narrow it, but you still want the blade. I want it one piece. And again, quarter sawing it to have that vertical grain makes a very, very strong paddle. So, and then I carve whatever shapes and styles that I want into it. I've got a couple left that I've kept for myself over the years, so when we go inside, I'll just put a quick flick up on the video there so you can get an idea of what we're talking about here. But anyways, that's quarter sawing, and that's what these logs are all going to go to firewood for the most part. But maybe this one, actually that's kind of a nice one down there, although it's pretty small in diameter. This one I don't think is too good. But I don't need too many, I don't need a whole lot. But I can get these cut up into quarter sawn boards, and then I can let them just air dry out in the garage in the cool and the dampness of the normal, whatever the normal air is. And you can see that they're checking here. They've been here a year now, about a year, sitting in this pile. So, you know, by having the extra length, I can take out sections that I need. I may lose a foot on each end, whatever the case may be, but it doesn't really matter, because as you can see, I've got a pile of them to choose from, and there's a lot more where these came from. So okay, let's carry on. Okay, I tried to do this down in the den, but because of the length of the paddles and so on, I was clunking them on the ceiling, and I didn't want to, it wasn't very light down there anyway, so I thought I'd bring them up outside here in the daylight where you could get a look at them in their natural light. So the 3 paddles that I have left that I've carved, one of them is not quite finished, so it's relatively new. One of them is the first paddle that I've ever done, and the other one is one I've done several years ago. So this first paddle is one that I did back in the 80s. I don't remember the date specifically. I didn't date it. No, I didn't date it. This was a broken off old cedar fence post, and the post had rotted off right at the ground level and had snapped off, and the fence was tipping over at that point. So when I went out to dig in a new post, I kept the top part of the post above the ground, which was this piece here, was still good. It just rotted off at the soil level where the dampness was. So I took a froe and I split down the boards, or split a board out of it, and at the time, and still, I was interested in some of the native art, and the art that I was liking then and now is from the Queen Charlotte Islands, which is part of Canada, just off the Vancouver Island. It's the Haida Iguai are the natives that are there, the Haida natives. And this is a style of paddle that they did. And instead of having the long tapered shank, which is just basically round and then swelling out to the palm swell, as you can see, their design started at the top and just had a long, relatively natural taper all the way down, and then it had a very long, narrow blade. And I still like the look of that long, narrow blade, actually, very much. So I carved the loon in here. It's actually carved in. You can see there's, I don't know if you can see that. There's actually the carving is there. And it's a stylized native style loon. And I was entering this in a competition, so I painted this just to have it stand out more. And that was the first paddle I ever made back in the 1980s. And I've never used it. It's super light being out of cedar. But it's one that I just kept. It was my first one, and I don't know, just sentimental, I guess. So I kept that one, obviously. The second paddle, it's not the second one I ever did, but the second one I'm going to show you is a conventional style. It's just a pretty much of a normal paddle. It's got the natural palm swell on the top here. And this one, I just burned in some design here, and this paddle, I've got my initials on it right here, I'll show you. And the date on this one, I burned it in, is 1992. So I don't know if you'll be able to see that. I can't see the screen well enough to know, but just that design there, my initials in 1992. And on the other end here, I've done, again, a native art styled beaver. So there's just some more of this artwork here, a little flower being there, and then the stylized beaver. And I don't know, I can't tell in the light here. I can tell you're on the screen there, but I can't see whether you're actually getting the picture. So I'll hold it, I'll just turn it ever so slightly a little bit. Hopefully when I edit this, we'll be able to find out that you actually saw it properly. So I've actually used this paddle. I don't use any of these on a regular basis. I have other paddles for that, but I like these just because. The one I'm working on currently is this one here. Again, a more conventional blade style, but on this end I'm starting to carve the head of a bald eagle. Let's see, there we get it in front of me there, it'll hold up better. And I only painted it with a kind of a water paint just to sort of decide how I wanted to shape it. And it's all going, this will all be sanded off, and I think I'll just finish it in a natural wood. But I'll have to carve all the feathers in, so there's still quite a bit of carving to do there. Also, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a couple of spots here that when I was working at it with the draw knife and the hatchet, it caught a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but just little nicks in there. And again, just on the transition here, there's a little bit of a nick right there. Actually a little bit on both sides, but not much, mostly right here. And on this one, I've carved, or actually I've burned in mostly on this one, the eagle's head on this side. And I don't know why I choose these particular things, just whatever happens to be in my mind at the time. And on the other side, I've done the whole eagle. So there you go. And I'll finish this. Most of this kind of thing I do during the winter because, you know, when it's such a short season outside in the summertime, whatever you have to do, you got to get it done in a hurry because you've only got just a couple or 3 months to do it. So when it's cold and the wind is howling and I don't feel like going out, or it's just not reasonable to go out, I'll sit and carve on these things. I carve ducks, and I need to make myself a set of skis. So I'll be doing a set of skis from the wood that you'll be seeing in one of these episodes here coming. And, or actually the episode that this one is part of. So that's it. I want to thank you for coming along. I really do appreciate it when you join me. It's very encouraging. to have you come along there to make sure that I keep trying to put forth best effort. It's nice to know that somebody's watching. If you know anybody else who might also enjoy it, please share it. I would appreciate that as well. Keeps the interest up. And like and subscribe if you haven't already. And you all have a good day. Everybody have a good week. And we'll see you all the next time. So long.